All right. Looks like we're live.
We're live.
Kaido, Will, you guys ready to go?
Let's do it.
Yeah.
All right. So we're excited today to talk about a lot of things, actually, but namely the partnership that we announced, I believe, a week ago between EigenCloud and Syndicate, and specifically a new product sort of solution that we're jointly working on called AVS Sequencer Networks. So, going to spend a lot of time digging into that and the background and the masterminding between particularly Will and Kaido on this thing that they dreamed up. I guess it was a while, but feels like also not too long ago. So we're going to get into all of that, but the first thing I want to start with is actually Kaido and Will. You guys both know each other from like either one or multiple previous lifetimes, and I've been wondering about what the connection is. We haven't had time, I feel like, because we've just been so heads down, getting this partnership and getting this new solution up and running, that we haven't had the time to fully investigate this. But if you can clarify how you guys know each other so well for me and for the people that are listening in here, that would be really interesting to me. So I don't know which of you, maybe both of you can tell your side of the story here, because I've got a
Actually, Will, I
ton.
don't know what you're gonna tell the story from your end, what it's gonna be. Um, I can share my side, how I know of Will and how we how we get to know each other. So where do we start? I think it's about 3 or 4 years ago. I started diving really deep into crypto, and one thing I was super passionate about is data governance and just governance in general. And there's a lot of new experimentation going around new kind of ways to have ownership on the internet. NFT was one way. DAO governance was just starting up. Uh, Grassroots innovation was starting. And I remember very vividly, there's at one point where I saw a tweet. I think it's from some rando. At the time, it's like, oh, this is something called loot, and it's really amazing. And on top of it, why don't we have a currency to help facilitate building it up? And that rando turns out to be Will later. But I was just super fascinated. I was like, wait, there's no way someone just can launch a token, coordinate people together, and to drive towards a shared objective goal. And I was like, that's how I first knew of Will. And then, as we went back to school, and we realized actually Will was a few grades, graduated a few grades earlier than I did. And in the entire uh, ecosystem, in the uni ecosystem, there's not many people who I feel deeply understand crypto and even care deeply about crypto from like a philosophical sociology standpoint. And so I've just been following his work for a long time and sort of always adjacently know of Will. And I think we had one time to meet up at a school where we sort of introduce each other. I don't think we spent a lot of time. And then I think the most interesting part is, I don't know, Will, if you feel this. I feel like I would always know you for a while, and I always know a
Yeah.
lot
Yeah.
about
Same
your
for me.
background. And even when we're designing a lot of this, it feels like, okay, either you're proposing something or I'm proposing something, but we're proposing what was already in each other's mind. I think it just come from the shared background of our appreciation or maybe our suffering through governance, our shared appreciation and goal to build a user-owned, builder-owned internet. And I think that's sort of how we get to know each other. But we'd love to hear, Will, from your side. What was your story?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's very similar on my end. So the DAO space is pretty small. And back in 2021, Ian, Kaido, as you recall, we're getting like all sorts of like wild, weird DAO ideas coming our way. Ranging from, of course, like adventure gold and like on-chain gaming with loot to like buying the US Constitution via Constitution DAO, to all sorts of like experiments around, yeah, data governance, data ownership, new funding models. And the DAO space is small, and I kept on bringing up ideas to friends, and they'd be like, "Have you talked with Kaido about this?" And I'm like, I'm like, not this one specifically, but like I do think that we should jam on it. And like people just kept being like, hey, I think Kaido's thinking about similar things. Then we finally meet up and we finally jam, and it's great. And it's just like total mind meld. And like even like with the Eigenlayer partnership that we announced, like we get on the phone, we're like, hey, like we think this makes sense. Yeah, we think this makes sense. We diagram an architecture proposal, and we're like, yeah, this looks like it would work. Like sometimes with groups, it's like, 2, 3, 4 turns on the architecture before we land on something. And this was just like, oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Perfect. What's next?
And on the governance side, I also feel what's super interesting is I think in general, to my background, Will, we both sort of came from adjacent governance adjacent. I think Will was doing a lot more fun stuff. I was just doing governance in the crypto space. And there's very few people who's technical in governance who understands like how the DAO actually works in the smart contract level, what are the trust assumption on the blockchain, what is social consensus, how everything ties together. And I think that's also the shared background me and Will have. Like we both come from a very technical background, but we're also fascinated on this like human level of things. So like I think that's also makes a lot of the translation and working together super smooth as well.
Yeah, okay. Thanks for cleaning that all up because I remember, our first call, like literally within 30 minutes coming out of that going, like Kaido, you going, okay, let's go big, let's do this. And as Will said, that usually doesn't happen. That usually only happens in our experience when there's someone who is like already aligned with kind of this vision, that we've been building towards for years. I remember very distinctly you mentioning that our vision for a community-owned internet was deeply resonant with you, which like if you only kind of get with someone who's really deep in crypto, but also usually someone who's deep in DAOs actually, and deep in governance and sort of how to build ownership into these networks natively. So that was really cool to see. But it's crazy now that you've explained this, that you actually met Will through a tweet about loot and adventure gold, not the fact that you both went to the same school. That's even more insane to me.
Yeah, and those was just a shared background. Sometimes I one person I graduated with is like, oh yeah, I live right next to a well, right? Stuff like that. And then it's like, oh wait, you guys are building the A16Z ecosystem as well. Okay, share investor base. Like, and there's a lot of commonality between us as well. So it makes this like super, super interesting that we don't need to talk a lot on the phone. We hop on a call, we super align on the design and everything else.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so now that we've answered the big question, let's jump into the next big one, which is like, how would you describe AVS Sequencer Networks? And second, like to that, like to folks who are just maybe hearing about this for the first time, or maybe they read the tweet and are curious to like understand more. Like let's unpack it from kind of the high level, and then we'll get really deep into the details. But like, what are they in your words, and why are they important? So maybe Kaido, do you want to start, and then I'll ask the same question to Will.
I was gonna say Will is the expert here. You should start, and I'll add in some different aspect how I see it.
Sure. Yeah, no, I'm happy to. So maybe I get maybe I start with like why there was such a mind meld when we hopped on the call, which is so Syndicate offers programmable sequencers. And that allows for a ton of flexibility in terms of how you customize your rollup, how you scale your rollup. Um, but and then there's something that we need to solve, which is like, how do we handle customizability of data that's cross-chain or off-chain? Where do we fetch it? Where do we plug it in? And in particular, if that data is being used in economic ways for things like block ordering or block auctions or transaction prioritization, things along those lines, like you want it to be economically secured. Like if the output is economic, the security as input should be economic too. And we're sitting there and we're like, okay, well, this solves a major problem for us where these AVS sequencer networks can now pull in any off-chain or cross-chain data with like the full economic security and backing of the stake. That's great. That solves a lot. And we're like, but there's probably something bigger here. And the thing that we hit on that Kaido, you should talk more about is in addition to us needing to fetch all sorts of data, on your side, you have a bunch of groups that are operators of AVSs. And we have a bunch of groups running our software for programmable sequencers. So we're like, well, if we tweak our sequencer software to also include AVS support, now not only is every single sequencer able to be secured by AVS stake, which is useful, but every single sequencer is also an AVS operator. So that becomes really, really interesting. Like all of the hosting providers that we have gotten to know well, all of our like one-click setup can be applied to becoming an AVS operator. And then on your side, like we can help bootstrap this whole system end to end across both operators and the actual service that's being validated. So that was really exciting. It was like, whoa, we have all of these resources we've already built up. We add AVS support, and suddenly this turns into something much larger than any individual part could be.
100%, 100%. From my to add on to what Will said, there are two parts. Like number one is why the sequencer network is important, and the second part is how does the AVS side tie into it. I think the sequencer network is very, very critical from a variety of different reasons. There's a technical and also to me like more on the governance control, like philosophical side. On the technical side, it's about reliability and also about keeping the market in check. So what is reliability? You know, if you have one person owning everything, that one person fails, the entire thing fails. But you have multiple entities who are independent from each other, who are geographically distributed, that adds a lot of resiliency into the overall system. The other part on the technical side is also market structure. If there's only one sequencer who can price whoever at whatever way it wants at all times, that has a monopolistic pricing impact on the overall network. And user welfare, the broader, there's a lot of economic question we can dive into, but the user welfare is not maximally, it's not maximized. So I think on the technical side, having a distributed, decentralized sequencer network helps a lot on those different issues. On the social or governance side of things is, I think, what I'm more passionate about, even though, day one, I'm a researcher and technical person, because I think control is deeply enshrined. The more control you will have more control in the future. Control and power begets more control. And if you start day one in a distributed manner, where there's check and balances across each individual participant, where the system will go in the future also becomes a lot more interesting and I would say aligned with the broader network than starting with the individual place. So like so how I'm thinking about it is decentralized sequencer have really great technical benefits around reliability and market structure, and also on the ethos of crypto and user-owned internet. So from very beginning, this is something that is very, very, someone is going to build it. It's all about how you build it, how fast you can build it. Do you have the ability to execute on this vision? And I think you guys are, amazing team to execute and to carry out this mission. Now, the second part is, why does it need to be an AVS? This goes into the question, if you want to distribute anything or decentralize anything, who do you decentralize it to? And from that point of view, AVS is a great way. So what are AVSs? AVS are, at the highest level, it's a system of hardware operators, software, the people who are running the node software, and lastly, capital. The capital dictate which operator, which hardware runs the software. It's a coordination between, in my word, it's a coordination between software, hardware, and capital. And the way to figure out who should decentralize and who should run and how much power they should have in the overall rollup ecosystem should be heavily dependent on the rollup themselves. And most rollup, a lot of them have tokens who are already out in the market, who are looking for a utility. And this also ties nicely that you can use your token to add value not only to your own network, but also achieve the benefit I just talked about around decentralized sequencing. So I think to me, those are the reasons why they're important technically, philosophically, and lastly, on the AVS side, to have token utility and tie the whole story together.
Yeah. I mean, and I'll be like overly reductive here, but if Syndicate is sort of bringing to the table programmable sequencers and sequencing, and then you have EigenCloud bringing, AVS and native token staking, you snap those things together, and now you have like effectively a new solution for decentralizing rollups and decentralizing sequencers to any community, right? Whether it's like anybody or it's the stakeholders of a particular network in the form of those token holders, right? As you were saying, Kaido. It's kind of interesting because sometimes I feel, and Will and I feel like this is a very controversial take actually, to like give control of a network and the sequencers to like the respective community of that roll up or of that network. Um, and I guess like my next question is like, why do you think that's controversial? Or maybe like a different way to say it is, um, there have been different visions, I guess, and different approaches. Like even right now, there's new networks that are either launching or about to launch that are taking different approaches to scaling or even maybe decentralizing, but really scaling Ethereum and blockchains. Um, and so I guess my question to both of you is, how do you see AVS sequencer networks, um, helping scale Ethereum and ultimately building an internet that is owned by its users and its respective communities? Will, maybe you can start there, and Kaido, if you want to add anything.
Oh man, I'm the one with the probably the spicier takes here, so yeah, I guess I'll set the stage. Um, good luck, Kaido. So basically, if you look at the entire history of computing, everything went from single large machines to many smaller ones. I mean, you go from mainframe to personal computers. Instead of one giant shared machine, you have everyone having their own device. You go from dedicated servers to cloud serverless environments, where instead of one big server, you have many small servers spinning up and coordinating. And in crypto, we're still in the mainframe era. We are setting up large chains on single large machines that don't easily have the ability to shard and break into smaller units. And every time this happens, like it always hits a limit and it falls over, and then people need to fix it. Um, and unlike cloud, where people hit this limit pretty fast, crypto has hit this limit more slowly. The main places where people have started to hit these limits are things like on-chain order books, for example, which are some of the earliest adopters of these purpose-specific chains, like Hyperliquid being an example. But most of crypto has not hit that yet. We don't have enough stablecoin volume or gaming volume or social volume or NFT minting to hit that for most of the ecosystem. But it's inevitable that chains will. And if they're not prepared for that, they will be in for a very, very difficult time because everything will fall over. But if they are prepared for that and they know how to horizontally scale natively by adding more and more smaller chains, then they're in a very good position. That's where AVS sequencer networks, like they're exciting for the programmability, they're exciting for the customization, they're exciting for the decentralization. But there's also a key detail, which is that as you split from one giant chain into many smaller chains, they need to be able to talk to each other very, very easily. And that's where AVSs come in. So I think, like, frankly, like crypto has just avoided this problem because its usage is low enough. Like when it suffers from its success, it will need something exactly like this. So that's why I'm glad we're getting ahead of this right now via EigenLayer and adding AVS support, so that the groups that are already hitting this, on-chain order books and such, on-chain games can benefit from this, and the groups that will hit this as crypto succeeds, because if you believe that crypto will succeed, there is like, you basically, like, it follows that you should believe in horizontal scaling, because that is the only way to scale with like crypto success case. We get ahead of this now, and we're ready for, you know, the massive surge of adoption that is hopefully around the corner with stable coins and regulatory clarity and all the tailwinds coming up.
I was expecting a lot more spicier than that. Well, that was what I was
Well,
gonna say.
I'm holding my tongue on the mainframes right now. So
That's
yeah.
the way I hold a very similar belief, maybe through a slightly different lens. The way I think about, first of all, I agree with everything well said there. I think this evolution, you know, from mainframe to hosted server to sort of cloudless compute, or even more smaller element, is sort of like the vision we're building towards as well. And this is also why our broader project name is EigenCloud. Is exactly to that vision. The way I think about like why this is not, might be even controversial, Yin, like similar to how you put it today, is there are many different problems a rollup need to resolve. And 2 years ago is to have a fraud proof. A year ago is maybe to have fraud proof with permissionless challenge. And as we move in this rollup centric horizon, there's always going to be challenges that we need to resolve. But given the resource and capacity we have, we can only resolve very limited set of problems from within the rollup team or within the broader rollup ecosystem. So I would say it's more controversial today, just because, like Will said, it hasn't hit the scaling bottleneck yet for some people, or the regulatory pressure in terms of decentralization hasn't, hit in the industry either. And I think EigenDA went through something similar, and we're seeing, this has changed quite a bit in the past couple months, whereas, adoption is catching up with innovation is the way I would phrase it. And this is also, I would say, maybe the innovator dilemma in some way. On the reverse is, even though there's no demand, but this is right, you just have to be early and build it out there and even create the market yourself. So I think this is controversial. There's two reasons why it's controversial. Number one is people haven't realized this problem that they will run into because they're so focused on their day-to-day today. And the second one, this is controversial, is because that just means you guys are probably right, and there's alpha. Right? If everyone agrees that what you guys are doing is exactly the most important thing, and there's a million different copycats out there, then it's a little bit too late. And I think this is sort of how I think about it. Is number one, it's controversial because it's early. Number two, is controversial because people has not hit the problem yet, but they're very, very close in hitting that problem in the coming month. Now onto the question around like how it directs into horizontally scaling Ethereum. The way I think about it is there are many different flavors to scale Ethereum. And the beauty of Ethereum scaling is there's no right or wrong design. There's only designs that we will experiment in the wild that people can try and people can test on. So I think this adds a very, very strong flavor that I personally believe is the right direction as well. Will that be the thing that everyone will pick? Will that be the one that all the Ethereum ecosystem will do? We don't need to, right? That's the beauty of Ethereum. It's diverse, it's flourishing, it's the infinity garden per se. So that's sort of how I think about how Syndicate and now what we're working on together here helps horizontally scale Ethereum.
You said a lot of things that are deeply resonant with me, and I think I would say for Will too. It's funny because you spend enough time in this industry, and you end up realizing that when you do something that like half of the people says is amazing in the future, and then the other half of people say this is like completely stupid, like that usually means that there's something really like amazing there. like I've seen this so many times over the last more than 10 years. And I do think that horizontal scaling is still kind of in that controversial state. I mean, maybe a little bit less so than it was like even a few months ago. But I remember 3 to 4 months ago, people saying, very intelligent, well-known people in our industry saying, well, it's just going to be Solana and Base and Ethereum and maybe one other chain. It's going to be like 3 chains, not 10 chains. And then you have, only a month later, things like Arc, Tempo, Hyperliquid obviously has been sort of, building up over time. But some of these like more custom purpose built chains. And now I think even to this day, if you were to poll people, they'd say, well, it's going to be okay, maybe 15 to 20 chains, not 50 to 100, right? But you just extend that out, and there literally is no sort of limit. I mean, it's kind of, yeah, rewinding back to sort of Web 2, right? Where it'd be like, oh, there's only going to be 10 to 20 large hosted server instances, not like thousands or millions post AWS. And I think that's kind of a reflection of where we are, in part because, Will, as you said, like we just haven't hit those scaling bottlenecks. But if you are on the ground, right, there are applications, whether they're consumer, financial, social, whatever, that are truly starting to break out on these large L2 or L1s, and they're basically getting crushed by the limits of scaling on a single chain. So it's so interesting, kind of, where the broad narrative is versus like where some of the like on the ground details are in terms of people that are really pushing the boundaries of scale and hitting these limits. And you combine that with then the decentralization thing that you were saying, Kaido, because yeah, like now some people are starting to ask these questions, which we see actually at the root being a question of decentralization. Because it's like, for example, how do I differentiate my network through customizations, through programmability, which only comes when you have decentralization, like of the sequencer, you know, natively, right? It's also questions of, okay, well, the market structure bill that, seems to be on its way to passing in the US, um, sort of creating this new digital commodity asset class, which is great, but really, forces the question of how decentralized is this network and how decentralized is this token? Okay, now we need to think about really decentralizing this network and the control of it, which is ultimately a question of how do you decentralize the sequencer of the network, right? And then also this other conversation that has been, happening for quite some time, which is around token economics and how do you actually fully unlock the promise of, token economics by giving token holders true control over the network, or doing more advanced kind of things where more and more value gets delivered to token holders through a variety of ways. Well, the answer to that, in our view, at the core, ends up being a question of programmability and decentralization. So it's so funny that you have these like really big kind of, narratives or conversations going on that in the space for months, or in some cases over a year, and people, continue to go deeper and deeper and deeper. And then some of them that are pushing hard enough end up finding that sort of many of these roads lead to decentralization and programmability, which, is so fascinating because a lot of people think decentralization is purely a philosophical thing. It's purely about sort of maintaining the original ethos of crypto or Ethereum or whatever. But actually, decentralization really matters from a legal perspective, from a scaling perspective, or in customization and differentiation perspective, and also from a token economic and value, you know, creation and accrual perspective. I wonder if either of you, have any similar sort of experiences or thoughts on this.
100%.
Maybe I was
I think
speaking from Will's perspective too. So maybe more
Yeah, Kaido, you
Kaido,
should
like
start.
what
Yeah,
is
you
it
and I
you? I
are
mean, I'm guessing you see a
on the
lot
same
of
page
this
there.
on the EigenCloud side.
No, 100%. I think everything you mentioned uh, is sort of the feeling we have around decentralization, around trust. The word we use a lot is like verifiability and trust, but I think it's all different flavor. We're trying to capture that into one word, which is generally very, very hard. But I do agree with everything you just mentioned there. I think from the perspective of, especially on the decentralization aspect, I think decentralization, it's a tool for an end. There are many ways for you to uh, get to the end. Decentralization, in my opinion, is a core mechanism to get to that end. And without decentralization, there's a lot of things that you just physically and mechanically couldn't do. Scaling is part of it. The other big part of it is around control, governance, and the broader social power distribution, if you will, of the broader network and how it will progress. So very much aligned.
Yeah, maybe this is for all the decentralization maxis, which at least there are three of them here. But yeah, I think decentralization in some ways has gotten a bad rap over the last few years, in service of sort of scaling and UX and other things. But like decentralization, as you said, Kaido, is actually a lot of things in our view. And there are some things that are very practical about them, right? Programmability and customization and control being, I think, increasingly important, especially you know these days. Will, any thoughts you want to share here before we start going really deep into the solution?
Yeah, I mean, decentralization, I mean, and we've been around for a while, since like 2013, 2014-ish, and decentralization there was so obvious because at the time people thought that Bitcoin even would be regulated out of existence. And people tried. I had the misfortune of a New York State protecting me from buying ETH between 30 cents and $20. Um, I could not buy because they protected me from it. Um, and it was very clear that decentralization was necessary in such an emerging market. Um, and then that continued to show its strengths. Like the DAO hack was when people reconciled the differences between code is law, or, like, is it actually, the programmer's intent? That is what matters. And that was like something that was reconciled as a community. And all of the early ETH innovations came in a way that was very organic, very grassroots. NFTs emerged from weird things that people were hacking on. A lot of the experimentation around even Solidity, there were multiple competing Solidity proposals. There was like a Python style version, and like Solidity as like a JavaScript style version. There were a bunch of different competing options uh, before Solidity won out. And it was so clear that like these community contributions made a massive difference. And then in 2021, decentralization took on a weird narrative, which was that decentralization was regulatory arbitrage. And it's like, oh, we can't do things centralized, but we can do things decentralized, so therefore we'll be decentralized. Um, and it's kind of like what would happen if like you like read the words of early crypto history without knowing why it was that way. Like you would see, oh, decentralization for regulatory purposes. And it's like not really.
I think that's the year that all the MBAs entered crypto, so that probably
You have
explains
an
a lot
MBA,
of
so you're
this.
allowed to say that. Uh, yeah, and then the regulatory situation became much clearer and much more lenient. And then everyone was like, oh, so we don't need decentralization anymore. Like, let's just like hyper centralize everything. And that's kind of where we're at right now. It's a very weird point where like people are missing that the decentralization exists for like grassroots, bottom up, lack of centralized control. We're like, no, it's just regulatory arbitrage and that doesn't matter anymore. So now we'll just do everything we want centralized. And it's like, no, no, this ethos is very important. It leads to better software. It leads to more resilient systems. It leads to systems that people truly own. Like, we're going to bring that back. And we're going to bring that back to rollups, which are currently very centralized. We're going to bring that back to things like order books, which are currently very centralized. And we are no longer constrained by what we can do, because now anything we can compute via EigenCloud, we can also decentralize and have run by a diverse set of operators. So we want to bring this ethos back, and we want to do it because we know it matters and it leads to better results. And I'm glad that we have the foundation in place for it.
Yeah, so that's actually a great segue. Why don't we pull up the diagram? So this was a part of the announcement of the partnership and solution that we are working on together that combines the best of EigenCloud and the best of Syndicate. So maybe, Will, maybe you can start, and then Kaido, please jump in here, because actually, when our team received the draft version of the diagram, I was like, oh, this has got Kaido all over it. I now know you just enough to know like how your beautiful mind works. But Will, maybe you can kick off by kind of describing from your view, like maybe walk through this overall solution design, but then also point out like some of the specifics in terms of the best of what it's getting from Syndicate and Syndicate Network, and also the best of what it's getting from EigenCloud. And then Kaido, I'm sure there's a bunch of things that you'd like to point out as well.
Yeah, totally. So essentially, the key thing to understand about Syndicate Stack is that we move sequencing from off-chain to on-chain. That's how we get programmability. That's how we get customization. That means that smart contract developers can bring all the tools that they know and start to change any of the sequencing logic. And to zoom out a bit, like this really matters because the sequencer of a rollup is where all the value flows. It's where all the transactions come in. It's where all the block production happens. It's where everything flows out. And that's not really being customized right now. That's not no one's really trying to change this. There's small attempts of making this faster, but that's kind of it at the moment.
Can you actually, just to zoom in here, like Will, in this world of purpose-built networks and stuff like that, just give maybe a couple examples or like reasons why customization matters at the sequencer level?
Yeah. So, for example, block ordering makes a big difference for a lot of use cases. So, like if you look at rollups today, 80 to 90% of the revenue is not coming from gas fees. Well, not coming from the base fees that are charged for gas, not coming from like the rates that every smart contracts are charged. It's coming from MEV, from the fees that MEV bots pay to be at the top of the block. And some people look at this and they're like, this is, bad, because like this means like MEV bots can outcompete regular users. Some people look at this and say it's good because the rollups are making more revenue. Though of course that revenue should flow to token holders for it to really be good. And some people look at it and they're like, this is, neutral. Like you give someone a tool and they're going to use that, and that's just the way the world works. My standpoint is like the tool is not enough on its own. So one simple example, MEV that's good for users is arbitrage between pools. So if ETH USDC and ETH USDT are quoting different prices that are unrelated to the value of the stablecoin, having someone arbitrage that is good. It ensures that these pools stay in line and users can get more efficient trades instead of having prices be out of whack, like too high, too low compared to other venues. But sandwich attacks, let's say, are bad. Sandwich attacks are basically where a bot squeezes transactions before and after a user transaction to cause them to lose money on things like slippage. And you can't like capture that with a coarse tool like gas fees, things that are good for the network or bad for the network. But you can capture that if you're able to look at activity over time. So basically what we have here is that syndicate network sequencers can be programmed via smart contracts. They can be programmed on chain, and you can add any logic you want that can be handled inside of a smart contract. You can also do things like inject off-chain data and such from different sources. But then the question becomes like, how do we check that this behavior was good or bad? Like how do we check that, for example, a bot doing block building did it in a way that is favorable to users and not bad for users, that they're doing arbitrage that's good and not sandwich attacks that are bad? That's where the AVS comes in as very powerful. So the AVS is basically checking all of the transactions before it's written as state, and it can review it and say, okay, there's like some security checks, like does all of this data match what I expect coming from, for example, EigenDA? Does it match, like do withdrawals and inputs and outputs match what it should be? So there's like some security checks it can do, but it can also, very importantly, do checks of this kind of like network behavior that goes beyond what smart contracts can do. So it can look at, a particular sequencer's history and say, is this sequencer doing block ordering in a way that's good for users? And is it refraining from doing block ordering in a way that's bad for users? It can basically enforce good behavior on this network. And then if the sequencer is doing bad behavior, it can trigger a slashing event. And ideally, the slashing event is the amount slashed is greater than the amount the sequencer would make by doing bad things that are bad for users. So then these sequencers don't engage in malicious activity because it's unprofitable for them to do so. That's where like this on-chain and off-chain merger is really exciting. Is because we can basically say to sequencers like, hey, you have the ability to order blocks, and there are certain things you should do and certain things you shouldn't do. And after you do this ordering, we're going to check it and we're going to make sure that this is valid. And if you're doing something that's not allowed, we'll either, forbid it entirely or, like depending on the implementation, we'll let you do it, but we'll slash you. So it makes no sense to do it because you will lose money. Both will lead to similar end results. Just kind of depends on how you design this system. But that's what I'm really excited about is like this AVS. What it can do is we can give sequencers a really powerful toolkit, tell them to go wild, but only do things that are good for users. And then the AVS enforces that. It can look at all the history and it can say, yes, we know you're only doing things that are good for users. And if you're not, we'll ensure that you're penalized for that.
Yeah, that I think you really eloquently sort of explain how decentralization is not just, obviously people can use AVS sequencer networks to decentralize the sequencing of their rollup, which is great, right? People want to do that for a variety of reasons. But then also, kind of related to our previous conversation, the decentralization of the sequencer set, via this AVS, then also unlocks customization opportunities and revenue, and value creation opportunities, and they're inextricably linked, which is really exciting. So it's not just about decentralizing the sequencer set, which is in of itself extremely valuable, but also unlocking kind of these new customizations and new economic models and opportunities. Kaido, do you want to, excuse me, jump in here as well?
Yeah, happy to. So on the screen here, we have my amazing artistically written out design diagram. I may have a beautiful mind, but it's definitely not artistically beautiful. But the idea here, I think, is to walk through a user journey when a transaction happens. And perfect. So there's different steps. There's the syndicate network. There's the syndicate proposer AVS. Sort of, it's the area where the thin wrapper around the network itself that allows it to understand how much stake they have, how do you decentralize who are part of the network participant, and those stakes are at the end registered on the Ethereum L1 that has the ability to move tokens around, and for users to move tokens around and dictate their behavior on who's part of the network and who's not. So the programmability layer, I would say, is the green part. The ability for it to decentralize using eigenlayer is the middle part. And lastly, layer 1 is the ground truth for the entire network. So what we do is the best of all worlds. L1 is the ground truth, is our coordination layer. Eigenlayer from EigenCloud will be able to help coordinate the decentralization and distribution of the validator and the sequencer network. And lastly, the programmability portion to enforce all the customization happens on the syndicate. And we merge all three together, and we have a user-controlled, decentralized, programmable sequencer network.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible, to be honest. It's sort of seemed obvious, and actually, I think like even over a year ago, I remember Will and I talking about how we should just team up with EigenLayer, EigenCloud on this, because it was pretty obvious that our respective we were working at sort of a similar thing from different sides of the same coin. But it is pretty incredible now to just see this fully designed and working on it together, and how kind of complementary in many ways, like EigenCloud plus Syndicate is just going to work, and how respectively, like one alone could not. I'll speak for Syndicate itself. Like we were wrestling with this question about what is the best way to enable rollups to decentralize their sequencing, and so this was yeah, just sort of a very elegant way of offering that. One of the big questions I think that a lot of teams that we interact with a lot is, how difficult is it to migrate to one of these new solutions, whether it's like Syndicate's infrastructure, or now this AVS sequencing network solution. So we talked about this in the announcement, how it actually minimizes the amount of changes that are required. And maybe, Will, you can talk first about, and kind of if you want to add anything, but talk a bit about um, how it actually minimizes the amount of changes for a rollup.
Yeah. So, um, essentially, currently, the way syndicate powered chains work is that we replace the centralized sequencer with a decentralized smart contract that anyone can write to if they meet the change rules, which might be a select list of sequencers, like in the case of groups that have are operators of this AVS. It might be groups that are following certain transaction criteria, like pushing Oracle updates. It might be anyone can sequence, and anyone can submit anything they want at any time, and then the rest of the system enforces security of the data submitted. Um, but this works for one chain right now, Arbitrum Orbit, but it's somewhat hard to add new chains because we basically need to swap out their sequencer, which in Arbitrum Orbit is actually quite straightforward because Arbitrum Orbit designs the sequencer as an inbox and like pushes everything through the nodes. But things like OP Stack, for example, the sequencer has a more powerful role, um, and does things like simulation and validation of transactions prior to submitting them. So there is like a category of chains that we can add support for much more easily thanks to the system, because the AVS effectively lets us decentralize a powerful sequencer. So it's easy to decentralize a sequencer that's very weak, that like if they submit bad data, it gets ignored by the nodes. That's easy because like it doesn't matter if they submit anything bad. But it's hard to decentralize a sequencer where if they submit bad data, it causes the whole chain to halt and fall over. But we combine this AVS with these sequencers, and now we can get all these customization benefits without needing to completely swap it out. We can do much lighter changes to make this work. So there have been groups asking us for support for additional chains. And now we have a really clear answer to them. Instead of needing to rebuild the whole sequencer, we essentially take the sequencer and we ensure it's AVS enabled and that it follows the rules of the AVS. And the tweaks are much, much smaller than what we'd have to do otherwise.
Yeah, and the goal from this collaboration is with the EigenCloud, EigenLayer integration with the AVS or without should be the same level of integration to the end customer or very, very minimal. And just also based on different operating system of the rollup, the different stacks people use, the changes could be different, like Will said, but generally it should follow very, very similar steps.
Yeah, that's super exciting. I mean, the fact that Syndicate and also Eigen Cloud were built in this way to not like be this totally new framework, but one that's compatible with existing ones, I think is hopefully going to be a huge unlock in terms of getting this adopted and actually helping these rollups decentralize and customize their networks. I know we've got a little bit less than 10 minutes, and so I kind of want to end on one question to both of you, which might be a bit of a big one, but obviously this partnership and this new solution is quite new. It's underway right now. Part of the announcement last week was that we are collectively seeking design partners to sort of build this with us, to their needs, right? So my question is, how do you guys think about ideal design partners here, right? Well, on the syndicate side, we're working with a ton of, teams, whether applications that are launching their own networks or, just straight up networks that are either new or maybe old or older, where they're looking to decentralize and really differentiate their network and decentralize their sequencers. And then similarly, right, Kaido, to you on the EigenCloud side, you guys obviously are touching lots of networks, whether it's EigenDA or AVSs or many other things that you guys offer. So yeah, kind of a two-part question is, who in your mind are some of the ideal design partners? Like some of them might be listening here or might be tuning in afterwards and listening to this and kind of getting quite excited about it. So like, who do you think would be kind of ideal design partners for AVS Sequencer Networks? That's my first question. And then the second question is generally like, just to kind of close it out, give you guys the final word. Like, what are you most excited about with AVS Sequencer Networks and this partnership more broadly? So either of you can start.
Yeah, I'm happy to kick off. So essentially, I want to talk to groups that are pushing the boundaries of what can be done on chain. So if you're pushing the boundaries in terms of scale, maybe you're a game or an order book or a social network, this is a really good fit because it allows you to have much more sophisticated logic than you would be able to otherwise. And then also if you're pushing the boundaries of data. So maybe you're wiring up a bunch of off-chain data sources for price oracles, or maybe it's like cross-chain data. Maybe you want to do mirrored assets across chains. Maybe you want to like offload compute to shards. All of this is a really good fit as well. So groups pushing the boundaries are very, very exciting to me. AVSs let us push the boundaries even further. So yeah, they should reach out. They can message me at Will Papper, my first name, last name, at Telegram or X or wherever else. Yeah, I'd love to jam on this.
Awesome. A customer profile perspective, think Will said it really well. Another area that I'm personally very interested, there's a lot of synergy between us, is EigenDA has this feature where you can stake your token and layer security on top for your own rollup to provide data availability guarantee. Now, once your token is already inside EigenLayer, what other additional feature you can run for the same operator set to provide feature to your own rollup is a top of mind question for us. And this is a very clear synergy where you first have your token stake inside EigenLayer, and the auxiliary service you can provide to your rollup are the first DA, second what we're doing here on decentralized sequencing, and there's a lot of fast follow that can extend because of the programmability feature we have on top of Syndicate, fast finality, bridging, MBB protection, so on and so forth. So I think from my point of view, anyone who's already using the custom quorum feature on top of EigenDA, where you're staking your token and layering security on top, this is a great extension of services you can bring to your token holder and also to your network. The other group of people I would think this will be really interesting for is going to be around people who care deeply about decentralization. So these are the people who are building for a very long-term vision and who are thinking questions that are 3 years, 5 years down the line, and are start implementing, experimenting with technology that exists today. So I think those are another big group of people who will be very interesting for both of us to reach out to work, and also reach out to me and my team, Will, Ian here, that we can work something together. In terms of what I'm most excited about in this and going forward is around execution. I think the idea is here. The vision is very clear. The value proposition is now it's us making sure that we will and we can execute with intensity in terms of go-to-market, partner outreach, to make sure that we realize the vision, everything we just talked about here.
Yeah, very exciting. Okay, so we have a high bar here, pushing the boundaries of scaling on chain, pushing the boundaries and the frontiers of decentralization, pushing the boundaries of actually token economics, token design. Because as you said, Kaido, yeah, like we see this too, where the future of tokens are actually increasing the utility of them and the value that they're creating for that network. So yeah, starting with DA, then to sequencing, programmable sequencing, then to all these other things that you mentioned, like MEV production and whatnot. Yeah, the opportunities here are unlimited. So yeah, if folks are thinking about that, which I think literally everyone in this space is, please reach out. All right. Well, I think we're up on time here, but thank you so much for those of you who have tuned in and stayed with us for listening in. If you're interested, please reach out immediately. We're looking for. We already have design partners on this, but if there are any more, please reach out, and we'll get working with you and your teams and your networks immediately. So, Kaido, thank you. Will, thank you. EigenCloud, Syndicate. We're very excited about this and excited to push the boundaries for the industry through this partnership. So really appreciate the time.
Thank you guys as well, and thank you for Pratik to putting this together. See you guys.
Thanks so much. Talk soon.
Have a good day, everyone.